Hey folks, welcome back to another JavaScript Jabber. This week on our panel we have Dan Shapir.
Hello from what we in Tel Aviv like to call winter.
Boy, I wish our winters were that warm. I'm Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs, where I think it got below freezing last night. That's 0 if you're not in the US and use something other than Fahrenheit. And that's like 32 degrees Fahrenheit, so it got real cold last night. This week, we're following up on the 9 Node Pillars episode that came out a few weeks ago or a month ago. So we've got some familiar faces, but we'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves again. I'm just going to start at the top of my screen, and we'll just kind of work our way down. We have Michael Dawson. Michael, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Michael Dawson. I'm the Node.js lead for Red Hat and IBM, as well as active in the project on the technical steering committee, and live definitely where it is, getting below 0 at night.
Right, practically neighbors. We also have Matteo Collina.
Hi everyone, I'm Matteo Collina, Platformatic co-founder and CTO, vice chair of the Node.js Technical Steering Committee, a board member of the OpenJS Foundation, author of many modules. You're probably using my software, even if you don't, even if you want or not. This is probably my tagline.
Awesome. We also have James Snell.
James Snell coming from Central California, where winter here means just slightly less sunshine than typical. I'm at Cloudflare. I work on their workers runtime. I'm on the Node Technical Steering Committee. I've been contributing to Node for, almost 10 years. In March, in just a few months, I'll have been on the Technical Steering Committee for Node for 10 years, a full decade, so which is crazy. But yeah, that's me.
Awesome. And finally, we have Natalia Venditto.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I am the lead for developer tools and experiences for JavaScript on Azure. And also participating of the OpenJS Foundation CPC. That's me.
So last time you talked about the 9 Node Pillars. I think it's worth maybe a 5-10 minute review, something like that. Just to kind of get people back into it. Obviously, folks can go back and listen to the other episode if they want the in-depth discussion. But then
They should. It was an excellent. They definitely should. It was an excellent conversation. It's an excellent article, and it was an excellent conversation, in my opinion. Unbiased opinion.
Well, my point is then we can get on with the other, 4 or 5 pillars. So really quickly, I'm just going to pull them out of the article. And then if whoever wants to can kind of jump in and just kind of summarize what was discussed. The first one is do not block the event loop.
Yeah, this one's pretty straightforward. It's like, you got to keep in mind that anytime you're running some bit of JavaScript, you have some function, nothing else is going to happen on that event loop. So it's like you need to make sure you're dividing your work into very small chunks. Allow the event loop to turn so you can pick up new requests, you can process IO, that kind of thing. So pay attention to that event loop delay, event loop utilization. There's a couple of metrics there you really want to watch closely and optimize your applications around that.
Yep.
And also offload, if you can, lengthy tasks to a worker if at all possible.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you talked about strategies on how to do that and what your code should look like in the other episode. So,
yep.
The next one is monitor node specific metrics and act on them.
Let me take this. Most of the things that people do when deploying Node.js is they monitor Node.js like it's in a completely like it's a black box, and this is a massive pain. Because in most cases Node.js has its own quirks and peculiarities, and monitoring it like a black box, you are essentially making it a Unity service. Biggest one being memory. Node.js will use as much memory as you make it available to it, and if you start killing it when it reaches whatever arbitrary threshold, you're killing the process yourself and then restarting it and complaining that your process is crashing all the time. You're killing it. Of course, it's crashing all the time. Okay. It's literally like this thing alone is probably, worth a few hours of write time, super high-end consultancy So this is for free. So, take it the way you want. But this is essentially, very easy fix. But most people don't. Most people monitor RSS, monitor CPU usage, but don't look into what's happening inside the process. And this is, makes all the difference.
One of the key metrics there that was added relatively recently is the event loop utilization. It's going to tell you a whole lot more information than monitoring the CPU.
Yeah.
Awesome. The next one is use Node.js, which is long-term support versions in production.
I think that one is like, as a project, we support the long-term support streams, and the recommendations really stick with those, because in terms of security fixes and stuff like that, that's where you're going to get those, and most people do want to update when those come out.
And these are the even numbered versions, right?
That's right. And they come out every October and are supported for 30 months.
They usually say LTS. It's the version number and then it says LTS. So if you have a question, just look for that and you'll know. I think we all kind of stared at each other on that one, like it was pretty clear that that's a good move. The fourth one is automate testing, code review, and conformance as much as possible.
Yeah, that one I'll jump in. We talked about last time. I think like Node.js is known for being able to let you move really fast and be productive, but you need really good testing to be able to move quickly to make sure you're not going to break things. And so that's where last time we talked about like how that is really your enabler to take advantage of the sort of speed and agility that Node gives you.
We also spoke about the fact that people still use old testing frameworks, which are showing their age, and that Node now comes with its own built-in testing framework that you can really easily leverage out of the box.
Good deal. And then it sounded like you got partway into, but didn't completely discuss, avoid dependency creep.
Yes, we spoke at length about how NPM is kind of like this black hole which sucks the entire universe into it. So you add one dependency which brings on another couple for the ride, which bring even more and more and more. And we talked about the fact that you need to really be, how would I say it, cognizant of what you're bringing in, intentional, I think was the term that we used. Think about what you're bringing in and why you actually need it, and if there are lighter weight alternatives, and beware utilizing multiple versions of the same library. Anything else we mentioned that I'm missing?
Yeah, I think that one of the aspects was like within an organization, the good thing about NPM and all the choices there is there's lots of different choices, but like in an organization, it would make a lot of sense to choose a more standardized set of packages as opposed to having 5 copies of something which does the same thing but are actually slightly different. Because when it comes to helping each other or to debug issues or to be able to support them, that can be an advantage. Of course, there's always cases where you want to use something special to your particular effort, but like that's probably the 20% case versus the 80% case.
By the way, with regard to that, one thing that I thought of, and I don't think I mentioned the last time we spoke about this, is the fact that I know some organizations that intentionally take, call it micro front ends, microservices type approach of trying to create as much segregation as possible between various teams and reduce teams' dependency on each other. And that means that, for example, one team might choose to use one package or library, and another team should be free to choose something else, or that they don't need to move at the same rate with regard to versioning and stuff like that. Now, obviously, if they go the whole way with microservices, then they're probably also running separate node instances, which might reduce the impact, but they might be running within the same node instance, and then they're kind of working in contradiction to this recommendation.
I think like if you look at it, like maybe that plays into not forcing people to be using the same version, but I still think even in that case, there's value to say, like, let's all choose the same logger, right? Like, we don't need to use 10 different loggers. So, for example, if somebody moves from one team to the other, they already know the logger and the patterns and so forth that are used. And breaking it up into microservices, like, that's sort of a different kind of dependency in my mind, anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I've worked on a number of projects where we tried to segregate things out this way. And what I found is that sometimes there are good reasons for deviating from what the other teams are doing, and sometimes there really aren't. And so a lot of this, they try and segregate it so the teams don't have to spend as much time, coming together and collaborating. But this is more of an organizational issue, I think, than a code issue, in the sense that you should still be talking and you can still leverage the expertise of the other team where appropriate and say, all right, we've got to solve this problem. We know you have this same problem. What are you using? And then you can have the discussion about what and where and why. And then when we look at it from our problem perspective, right, because we're working on a different part of the app, then we may say that all makes sense. And we tried to put it in, but it turned out these concerns lead us to a different solution. But then you have a good reason for saying this is why we're doing it different, as opposed to the other thing. But it also then makes people more mobile between the teams. It makes it easier to talk about some of the similar issues. And so I think there's some nuance here, but I like the direction of saying, hey, at least consider what everybody else is doing in your organization.
Part of the concerns here is you really want to even say, okay, so we have created a way to a little a module to call this microservice, okay, that is consumed by everybody, okay? And I want to take that code and publish it on my internal registry. Because otherwise, each other team is going to redo it. And each other team is going to use a different HTTP library for calling it, okay? Which is bananas, okay? I've seen this happening over and over again, okay? Literally. Time wasted due to writing API clients. But now we have a point there for creating API clients. But this is essentially, this is part of the problem. This is one of the problems. Now, this happens to all the things, okay? It is, I need a library to validate that my custom field is correct, right? And then I need this custom data. Well, let's put it somewhere so that I don't need to re-implement it all every single time. So, yeah.
It comes down to being intentional. It just comes down to being intentional. You need to be more intentional than you are opinionated. Like, engineers are going to have opinions. I can't, I don't agree with doing it this way. I'm going to write another library that does it a different way. And it's like, in an organization, that's just not going to work. You can get so far with it, but it's just going to cause more headaches and overhead. So do it once, publish it for everyone to use. And you know what? If you don't agree with it 100%, so what? Use it anyway.
Yeah. As far as the integration between microservices, I agree. Go ahead, Natalia. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, in enterprise development, I think many people forget there is this intermediate layer, like everybody can consume from upstream whatever module they want. But again, like Matteo and James stated, you need to be conscious of what you're building yourself and make it available to others. In the end, you have a smaller ecosystem within your company, your organization, that allows you to publish to any private registry and also function in the same way as open source, but within the boundaries of your organization. And by the way, this is definitely an organizational convenience, not so much a technical one. I think in the front end, definitely try to keep dependencies that you're probably shipping over the wire to a minimum. But in the back end, what you want to do is to make sure that you have a lower maintenance requirement than when you have a lot of modules to maintain.
One thing that I encountered with organizations thinking about reusing their own components within the organization. So sometimes they're very explicit about it. So for example, if an organization, in the context of front-end development, an organization decides they're going to have a design system and they implement some sort of a front-end library, that's pretty typical. But working let's say in a certain project and then coming to a conclusion, hey, this bit of code that I wrote seems to be something that will be generally useful across the entire organizations. People have that aha moment, but are sometimes hesitant to act on it because you're assuming a lot more responsibility than you originally had. Like if you're just writing something for your own use within your own team, that's one thing. But committing to support every use case within the large organization, that's a different level of commitment altogether. And making that jump can be, significant.
Yeah,
I think
even
that's
if
kind of
that's true, yeah. Sorry,
Oh,
go ahead. Go ahead, Michael.
I said
Go ahead.
that seems to be the thing in life. The more you do, the more you pick up in terms of responsibility of keeping things going. So I can totally see people worrying about that.
Now, I have an absolute counter argument to this. Okay. And I want to flag how dysfunctional and why you need to be intentional when creating this kind of software, when thinking about dependencies and software usability within your organization and enterprise, and also how enterprise absolutely sabotage themselves while doing so. Okay, so imagine that each team needs to implement a piece of functionality. Okay, now one of the teams that they discuss, one of the team is the first one, and they created their own little module to do this. And this is, well, here it is. I'm publishing it on my NPM, internal NPM registry. Great. Everybody's happy. The management is very happy. We saved a bunch of money, so we can reuse all these things. Fantastic. Okay. Now, however, a moment after that's happened, the team that created that module completely drops the ball on it because nope, it's not part of my OKR anymore. The quarter has changed, so I'm not maintaining this anymore. And this is the typical thing what happens with OKRs, okay? If what you're doing is not part of your OKR, of your, does not help you achieve your key results, you are obsolete, that thing needs to be dropped, okay? Even though it's important and, you're saving the company a lot of money by avoiding duplication. So in reality, a lot of teams in some enterprise works a little bit like silos. And they are
a little bit.
yeah. I have. Yeah, I think Natalia has a few stories on that. So I don't know. It's but
after a decade as an enterprise developer, I have many stories. Yes, there are silos, and I do agree, Matteo. But typically, enterprise projects do not work under KPIs. The KPI is delivering your project. It's a little bit different than product. And another thing to your favor is that if you are building something that you publish to a private registry and you move to another project, which is usually the case of developers in the context of enterprise, you are rotating, you're going to a different project. You can reuse it, right? You have it available to your new project. Whereas if it's part of a private code base, you don't have access to it anymore, right?
And I think that sorry for the dogs here, but I think another aspect of this that's completely overlooked is a lot of times these internal teams will look at, hey, this other team created this package that I want to use. It's their responsibility to maintain it so I can get the benefit from it. That's entirely the wrong calculus. It's if I'm get up to use it in my project, I'm also picking up the burden to help maintain it. So, we can't have this idea that it's like, oh, that other team's responsible for it. No. All the same company, all the same team. It's equally my responsibility as anyone else's.
Let me be blunt. If your assumption is that if you run into a problem because your needs change and the package doesn't properly or adequately support it, and you're dependent on somebody from some other team who, as we said, may have different OKRs, different priorities, you're literally screwed. I mean, you have to take the attitude and the approach that if you're using it, you're assuming responsibility for it.
That can almost, though, be totally extended to every module you use from NPM, because in that case, the people who may be maintaining it are even further away from you and even have less reason to necessarily prioritize your your requirements. So,
but I'd 100% agree with that. I mean, I've said before many times where, especially companies, if you are making use of open source, then you as a company have an obligation to help support that open source that you're using.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes contributing back bug fixes, changes, or whatever, and working with those maintainers. Don't put that burden on them, especially if you're not paying them.
By the way, an interesting aspect that I've seen is that, at least for some organization, when they decided to share some resource across the entire organization, it was actually easier from the organizational perspective to turn it into an actual open source project than to try to maintain it as an internally shared resource. Because once it was declared an actual open source project, it was actually allocated resources, versus when it was just an internal thing that's shared, ownership was meh.
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to piggyback off of what Matteo was talking about a little bit earlier is that, and this is coming from when I was working on integrations, and it was mostly third-party integrations within an application that I was helping maintain, but also, between microservices, is that if you can structure because he was saying, if you're writing the microservice, you ought to be writing the library that consumes it and giving everybody a standard way of accessing it. And for me, if you can structure all of those the same way and make sure that they all kind of look and feel and are built in the same manner, again, it makes it easier for people across the organization to be able to come in and do that maintenance for you so that they can, you can move ahead. So then it's, hey, this microservice has this feature that they built in, but they haven't updated the library for it. Or maybe I need to pull the data in, but I need to do something a little bit different with it before I consume it in my service. If it's all structured in a similar manner, then I know where to go ahead and add that in, and then everybody else benefits from it. And I don't have to go in and reverse engineer this driver or that driver or this integration library and that integration library.
I do want
to push us along a little bit, because we're never going to finish the pillars otherwise. I do want to
finish them today.
Yeah, I do want to touch on two things that were mentioned in the article in this context, at least briefly. One is that Node APIs versus web standard APIs, and the other, you also mentioned monorepos. So can someone talk about the Node.js standard native or standard APIs versus the web standard APIs?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that. We have a number of places in Node now. The old URL parse versus new URL, Node streams versus web streams, old Node crypto versus web crypto. We have a lot of these cases where we have, duplicate or overlapping APIs. Let me talk, URL was the very first one that I introduced. And there was a huge controversy even within the project. I was actually yelled at a conference by another Node contributor, actually yelled at for suggesting that we add this. Because URL parse is there and it's fast. When we added the new URL parser, the WG URL parser, it was slower, but it was standard. And folks reuse libraries that were on Node, in Node and browsers, and Dino picked it up, and that, and suddenly you can use this thing everywhere. It's much more portable. Now it's faster than anything else. We're going to see this pattern continue. And whenever you're selecting which API to use, say Node streams versus web streams, be very intentional. Don't just make it an accidental choice. Be very intentional in how you adopt these. Node streams are going to be way more performant than web streams, but web streams are way more portable. So you need to balance which goals you're looking for and make sure you're selecting your dependencies accordingly. The more you have to translate between them, say if you're using both Node streams and web streams, the more overhead and the easier it's going to be to get it wrong. So you need to be very intentional about your strategy and which APIs you're picking. But something URL parse, just don't use it anymore. Use new URL. So
something important is Node.js in general, has added a lot of APIs in the last decade, and most people still develop Node.js like it's 2014. So please stop. Okay, take a look at what's there. Okay, like literally. Oh, we have fetch now. I was checking recently, and we a few of the top downloaded modules on npm are high level HTTP clients, and we had fetch for a while in Node. Okay, and
and even
Right.
simpler UUID, the UUID module. A lot of folks pull it off of npm to just generate a random UUID. Great, it's a great module, but compared to the API that's built into Node and browsers, we have a web standard API, which is random UUID. That's on the crypto object. It's way faster, way simpler, and it's just the thing you should use. You could drop an entire dependency. That's been in there since 2021, and folks are just now discovering that it exists in their runtime. So,
I just want to point out that Matteo pointed out that the Node team made fetch happen, and so please stop trying to make fetch happen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We were actually just, I think, Matteo, we were exchanging tweets about it or X's about it, or was it on Blue Sky? I don't remember anymore. So many options. And so that's number one. So basically,
I have a question here. Is there a good place to find these, right? Hey, you might be using a library for this and you don't need to anymore?
No. But it's probably something that we should develop and promote a little bit. Okay, maybe like this can be a good something that's missing. I don't know. They're there.
This is something I would actually look, Natalia, for like dev tools or like the developer experience and stuff like that. Because those of us that are actually working on the APIs suck at the documentation and actually promoting these things. But if we can start leveraging the tooling to like promote some of these things more and like say, hey, there's this other thing, it might be interesting to look at that. We need to get better at this.
A certain way to go about it is to basically, if you're looking for certain functionality, check if there's a web API for it. And that's really easy because, for example, you have got MDN, and then just check if that also exists on Node. That before you rush off and npm install something.
Well, one of the things we are doing in the project is we're ramping up some ambassadors, and part of that we're coming up with messages we want those ambassadors to help promote. And that suggestion of like, I think we've called it something like developing with modern Node.js, right? Like to highlight here are the things that are available that might not have been available before is definitely on the list of things that are being brainstormed there.
Anybody wants to say anything about monorepos before we move on to the next one?
I'm just going to say use PNPM. This is my preference. Okay, this is my personal preference. Use npm when you don't need monorepos. Use PNPM when you need monorepos. This matches more or less my. Yarn seems to work fine for a lot of people, but genetically, my current status is I'm very happy with PNPM. I don't know, Natalia, what you guys use? You have a lot.
I second. Yeah, I second that. I use PNPM for monorepos right now, and NPM for all the rest.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. There's out of all of them, that's the one that handles this better. Their patterns are they actually make sense.
So Chuck, maybe move us along to the next one.
Yeah, I was going to say, sounds like we've gotten that one. So the next one is de-risk your dependencies.
I think it comes back to the part we were talking about being intentional. Like, I think too many people pull in a very deep dependency tree without thinking about it, and it's, once you've pulled things in, then we talked a little bit before, like you almost need to take on the approach of like, okay, I'm using this, am I ready to help maintain it? Because like as an organization, not, James mentioned like you should do that because it's the right thing to do, but I also think as an organization, it's risk management, right? And most organizations, that's a big part of them, is like, how do we manage our risk? And as soon as you've pulled in the software, it's part of the things you should be looking at in terms of managing your risk and saying, well, like if we had to switch to something else, could we? If we had to make a change, could we? Is it a healthy project? And I think in near the end there, we talk about like one way to manage your risk is to support the project either through your people or through funding. So most organizations should probably invest a little bit more time in managing that particular risk than they do.
Maybe if the maintainer gets enough support, he won't sell, or he or she won't sell the project to some nefarious third party.
Well, that's an extreme example of the case, right? Or they just might not have.
Well, the Node.js ecosystem, unfortunately, has been full of those, a couple of times already. So, unfortunately.
Well, it doesn't even have to be sold, right? If a maintainer runs out of time to get burnt out and they transition it to somebody without fully vetting who they are, then somebody else can come in and take care of the project, take advantage of the project. Anytime you add a new dependency that you don't control or you're not contributing to, you're adding risk. And if you're bringing in a module that brings in 100 different dependencies, then you're increasing your risk 100-fold. So you just have to be very intentional about what you're bringing in. You have to be very intentional about what you're going to support. And companies have to stop looking at open source as just free software that they don't have to do anything with to use. They have to help maintain it, or they're just opening themselves up to risk. And then if we look at some of the new federal guidelines, it's not just U.S., EU as well, around SBOMs, actually being able to produce an audited list of these are the dependencies I'm using. Here's how they're maintained. Here's what the licenses are. A lot of folks bring in these dependencies without ever thinking about that. But if your module ends up in some, being used in some regulated industry, you have to be able to account for those things and be able to account for the risk. So it's not just a best practice. In some cases, it's an absolute requirement.
And there's tooling that can help you with this, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, because it's not just tooling, but it's tooling that you'll use, right? And for me, it kind of has to be automatic and get in my face because I'm lazy and I don't go look at it however often you're supposed to. It's like changing my oil, right? It's not till the light comes on and I go, huh,
Well, that's where I find it a bit surprising. Like, I don't know, however often it is, but every so often there's some high profile case where it's the extreme. The maintainer goes off and does something to their module that they probably shouldn't have, but everybody seems surprised that this can happen, right? And like, if you paid attention, it's sort of something you should know can happen and have planned, and so it shouldn't be a surprise. And everybody seems to get in a big fuss. And then after a few months, it tails off, and it's not in it's not in the news anymore, and people forget about it again. So I find that interesting.
Just anecdotally, I'm not going to say who or what module it was, but this is going back to 2015, 2016. One of the most used modules on NPM, and the maintainer was quite upset and threatened to just delete everything. Delete everything off GitHub, delete everything off NPM. And it came down within minutes that we were able to convince them not to do that. And it would have broken the entire ecosystem, literally, had they done this. And sometimes it just comes down to a maintainer being burnt out and not feeling like they actually have the support. It doesn't have to be anything nefarious. It doesn't have to be selling it or somebody else taking over. It could just be, God, I'm tired of dealing with this.
Yeah, it is important to mention, though, that following what happened with LeftPad, that specifically can no longer happen with NPM.
Yeah, but I mean, I can also see, because you guys have talked about, you hand it off to a new maintainer or, somebody otherwise takes it over. But I could see somebody just being tired and, they know they have a problem in their package and they know they want it fixed and they get a PR that looks like it solves it and it's got something problematic in it. I mean, just that easy, you've got something in there that you don't want.
Yeah, I think back to Dan's comment, like this has been a challenge or a feature of the Node.js ecosystem for quite a long time. So things have improved, like, the NPM, you can no longer delete things. And so a lot of that learning has actually helped to improve the ecosystem over time. That other sort of language ecosystems may be relearning some of those lessons along the way. But
so beyond sort of being aware, right? Hey, there's an announcement, this package is going to cause you this problem, right? It's got, somebody put a backdoor in it, or, hey, we discovered a 0-day, right? It doesn't even have to be that nefarious, right? The best practice has changed and they haven't kept up with it, right? And so, you just need to update it or whatever. Beyond that, I mean, I know there's like NPM audit, but I kind of have to just run that on my machine when I'm running stuff. And, sometimes I see the notification, sometimes I don't. But are there tools that while I'm working are going to tell me, hey, you have a problem? Like I may not have seen the Twitter post, or I may not have seen the blog post or the announcement or whatever, that's going to help me stay up on this stuff.
Dependable is the first one, right? The first one you should be looking at. And it's going to automatically, unless you disable it, but you shouldn't. I don't think that's something you should do.
Yeah, and that's great. When I've also been becoming a big fan of the socket stuff, the new Socket.io stuff. So, not Socket.io, Frost's company.
It's socket.dev, I think.
Yeah, we had them on. I'll find the episode number and we can put it out there.
Yeah, I think the first part that Natalia mentioned is just keeping up to date, and there's tools that will basically, like those, help you keep up to date. And then there's other tools like the Socket one or Snick who help look more specifically at
it's not true. Mike, was not true. Dependable also recently scans for CVEs.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
So GitHub will, if it will push, if it detects that there was a vulnerability, whenever you push commits to the repo, it will show you that there has been security problems.
Okay, good to know.
Exactly.
The Dependabot's fantastic. It's
the important part is that it just works. Okay, like you have to do nothing here. It just detects it automatically. You just need to use GitHub. And if you are a developer and you're not developing on GitHub, well, okay.
I think though you have to build a habit of not ignoring it. I think a lot of folks, have turned on. They're like, okay, it's there. I'm not, and they just don't act on it at all. So I think yes, it does require building a new habit.
Yeah, I guess that comes down to...
We do that with a lot of stuff. We ignore a lot of stuff.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
That's just like that comes back to because the CVEs are not that great, right? So you can get a lot of noise.
That's a different conversation.
Really aren't issues, and that sort of unfortunately reduces the benefit of some.
That's
Look,
conversation.
People ignore medical conditions. Like, what do you expect? People like to ignore things.
Yeah, my car has been complaining that it needs an oil change for the past month, and I haven't done it yet. So yeah.
Anything else you want to say about this?
Right?
Look, but to be fair, people use stuff on NPM because they want to reduce their workload, and they don't consider the load that they're assuming when they do that, and they are sometimes resentful even of it. So it is what it is. But yeah, definitely, if you're going to be using packages, you need to assume responsibility for the packages that you're using.
And I'll just say, it's not just that people get resentful of it. Some people look at what's published on NPM and they're saying, hey, you gave me this thing for free. Cool. You're now obligated to support me forever and answer every question I have to answer. So no, there is no such thing as entitlement here. If you're using a package, if it doesn't work for you, help maintain it. Don't demand that I do it for you for free.
I just want to say that for anybody who's listening to this podcast and rather than watching it, you're losing half of Matteo's input.
I call them vampires. Okay, they are the vampires of open source. Okay. And vampires can be, you need to put out garlic and you can stab them in the heart with a piece of wood, right? So that's what you do with them, okay? So basically, I have zero tolerance for vampires in any of my repos, Okay.
Yeah, the problem really is that Dracula was that one vampire and with a whole world full of humans, and here in the open source community, it's the reverse. The vampires are
Of
the
course.
majority.
Fine.
Yeah.
But I've zero tolerance. Like the one that they get really toxic about it. When you tell, nope, it's your bug, it's not my bug. Okay? It's your problem. It's your problem that your production is broken, not mine.
Yeah,
Okay?
but don't you think it's a cultural problem? Don't you think it's a cultural problem at a system level? Like we were discussing earlier that developers are not used to sharing the responsibility. And
I totally
this is where
think
probably we need to educate
I totally
more
think it's
on
a
that.
cultural problem that the majority of humanity are whiners.
All right, I'm gonna derail us back to our node pillars here, and we're gonna move along to avoid global variables, configs, or singletons.
Yes, this is a big one. This catches a lot of people, and it's not just Node. I'm just saying, like, for workers, completely different environment.
It's programming. Avoiding global.
It's a global problem.
State.
Pun
we have a
intended.
big problem with global state because global, individual like IO is tied to an individual request. And if you store global state related to a request, try to exit from another request, it ain't gonna work. So, like here, we made it explicit, like don't do this. But yeah, in Node, we run into this all damn time that people just trip themselves up.
It's
so
fantastic.
how is Node different than general development? Like I've been writing code for 30 years. I remember when I started, people were telling me, my teachers, my mentors, whatever, don't use globals. Like what's new in Node that kind of changes the dynamic here?
A significant portion of the developers that arrive in Node, okay, it comes from a front-end background, okay, and originally, historically, okay, let's put it in the jQuery days, okay, all the state was handled in a global fashion.
Global single.
The DOM.
And yeah, the DOM. That comes back to the DOM,
Mm-hmm.
okay? The problem is it's one user, okay? One browser, one user, one state, okay? To some extent, it's super simple, okay? Makes total sense, okay? Node.js is not a browser, okay? One Node.js process can handle more than one state. With one exception, if you deploy on AWS Lambda, or so that or workers where one request is one state and one user. So you could potentially cheat that. And that's what, those kind of environments gives it to you. Because in fact, JavaScript developers don't seem to be able to understand this principle. But
it's not limited to JavaScript developers. So we see people, no matter what language you're at, they're making basic mistakes.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything unique to that.
No, it's probably not. But anyway, a lot of people also, so a part of them, they never know anything different. They come from a diverse background. They didn't study any of this stuff. Okay. The other part is a group of people that we used to do all software engineering and do a lot of interface and a lot of things, come from a Java or .NET background, that when they swap to Node, they throw package at all of that and throw it away. And when you show to them how you can, you can actually use this pattern to build a system that is modular and, so I can do all the things that I was used to do in Java or .NET in Node. Yes, you can. And they just, I didn't know.
Yeah.
So my question is, like, what exactly is the solution here, right? Is it like importing environment variables? Is it
learn programming?
Right. But I mean, some things you do have to bring in through configs, right? I mean, they are essentially going to be globally available.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
so my Stripe keys or API keys, or you set Node end to production, and right, and that kind of changes the game. So stuff like that. Yeah. What's the best practice?
Dependency injection is the big one. For modules, some modules and stuff, when you go to require something, you get back some singleton thing. Rather than that, it should return a factory that you can use to create your state management. So I think there are a number of things. I think some of these are discussed in the blog post, and Matteo or Tom are going to talk about them. But dependency injection is the big one. You want to actually say, for this particular bit of code, this is what I want to make available to that, not just have it generally available for everyone to access.
Also, if all your objects are singletons, it's not object-oriented programming, and all the data within a global singleton, all the fields within a global singleton, certainly all the public properties within a global singletons are effectively all globals. So if I'm saying, no, I don't have 100 globals, I have just one global, but it has 100 public properties, then you've got 100 globals.
Yes.
And in general, beware also mutable state. It's certainly global mutable state.
Yeah, avoid it at all costs if you can. And this is the problem with things like process dot whatever in Node. It's a global. It's a global. A lot of folks, what we find, are using that for feature detection. Right? They'll say, hey, if process exists, then obviously I'm running a node. Well, no, because process now exists in Dino and it exists in Bun, it exists in workers. Okay, well, instead of using process, let me look at process dot whatever property. Well, if the these other runtimes start also adding that, relying on these globals, just the existence of these globals, just to depend on where you're at, everything still breaks. You're just shifting the problem; it's going to break somewhere else. So there's lots of problems with these ideas of having these globals, and it's not just whether you're storing state; it's what decisions are you making based on the existence of the global.
It's user agent strings all over again.
Yeah. Only made even worse because there's so many different ways of doing it. So.
Oh man.
The worst pattern here is those applications that then they are fully configurable using environment variables. Okay, and the environment variables are spread into 1,000 different files. So you don't know what are the config, and each one has a different default, and you don't know what each of anyone controls. And the only way to know is just grab the full code base.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nightmare. Okay, and I don't, that's a nightmare. So you want to take, when your application starts, you want to take your environment variables or your config, you pass the thing, you get the values, and then you pass it down to each single application.
Now you've got a recommendation.
And especially,
go on.
Especially do not use globals if you're going to publish, like we were suggesting earlier, for everyone to consume.
Yes.
Because that would be a tragedy.
Yeah, you're just spreading your bad habits around and impacting everybody.
I would say that modules, any dependencies that you're bringing in, do not touch globals. I mean, if you're consuming globals, like global APIs, like URL, fine. Do not mutate global state from a module, period.
So you kind of said that there might be configs throughout your app. That is the issue, that you have your configurations that may be spread across different places where you get them from, or is the issue that you have a lot of places where it changes the way your code works? Or both?
I think both.
So usually you manage. Sorry to interrupt, but I really am trying to understand, James, what you're getting at. If I've got like what I like, effectively global configuration, like there are certain configuration flags that impact the behavior of my entire application. Would you rather have one module responsible for all that global configuration and everybody gets injected with it? Or would you rather that each module is just responsible for the configuration that directly pertains to what that module does? Like, what would be your approach here?
My approach would be that the application should collect whatever configuration is available and inject that into the modules. So the module itself should not be looking at process end. It should be relying on what arguments are passed to it from the application.
100%.
So I'm just going to ask, because if there are a lot of places where your configuration can change the way that the code flows through your application. It almost sounds like feature flags. And I know a lot of people use those. So are you arguing against feature flags, or do you see those differently?
I see them different. I think it comes down to how they're injected into the module.
Okay.
Yeah.
The problem is that sometimes it can lead to having to pass things through a lot of function calls.
Yes.
Like you're trying to get a flag way down, and now you've got to pass it through a lot of, A calls, B calls, C. Now I have to add a parameter to all of these functions, which really don't care about this feature flag just to get it all the way down. So I'm saying, hey, I'm going to clean the code by just making it global. And now I can access it from wherever I need to. It's kind of like the problem that React tries to solve with context in a way.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have the same. Like that's also where async local storage, kind of comes into play, where you can use async local storage to avoid that, having to pass it through each layer. But you still have to make the async local storage variable itself available, to the various places that it's at. So how do you do that? It's not a problem-free approach. It has its own challenges. Whether you have to pass this thing down or make some things global and other things not, you have to be very intentional and plan it out very carefully. But as a whole, overall, right, relying on dependency injection is going to be far better a pattern, or in a far more maintainable pattern for your application than allowing modules to just arbitrarily access and modify global state. Yeah,
for sure. Then you need to. Somebody modified my state, and I have no idea who.
Who moved my cheese?
Yeah. I do want, before we move on to the next one, you kind of made an interesting assertion in this pillar, which is always set node env to production. Can you elaborate why? Why, and why is it like?
This is an old battle. This is an old battle of mine. Okay. Now, all of this comes from one problem. Okay. For developers, if I ask 10 developers what the development environment is, they tell my laptop. If you ask 10 ops people, they say, oh, it's some servers running somewhere where the developer tests that code. Okay, that's the source of the problem. Okay, we use the same terms for two different things. Okay, now this means that somebody bright mind, published a module called config in npm, and then that loads you the node_env environment variable for loading up the config file. However, some libraries in like Express, for example, React and others, changes their behavior based on the node_env environment variable being set to production. Now, if you are loading the config for your server's environment based on that variable, you are essentially your staging environment or anything that is not production. Absolutely, you will have massive issues. And that config module is downloaded so many times, okay, which is unbelievable. And frankly, it should not be used. Okay, I'm very happy to stand here making these recommendations. So don't use that module if possible. Okay. So
when you say always, you mean when in development as well?
Yeah, no. I mean, in development is the only moment where you don't set it very often. But whenever you want to do any testing that is relevant to what production looks like, you need to set it to production, even if it's a staging environment. So, wait a second. I am using something that controls my environment that's called environment. I set it to production, even if it's a staging environment. Yes, this was such a bad term to begin with. Okay. And such a massive headache pain that unfortunately we are stuck with. So, and I'm sorry, please don't load the configuration based on that variable because it's a bad idea.
I've had that bite me squarely in the rear end before. So, all right, just in the interest of time, we're going to move to the next one. It's handle errors and provide meaningful logs. I'd stand up and scream, yes. because I've had this one hurt me too. But where are you guys?
For me, just the title of this one is one of the things where it's like that's good enough. The provide meaningful logs. I think this is not specific to Node. You know, we've all have examples of runtimes where it's just like, hey, error happened. Cool. Where, how, what actually is it? Take the time. You know, people have to understand that the errors that their system produces is part of the contract. It's part of the API. They need to be as intentional about the design of errors as they are about the syntax or the signature of the functions that they're exposing. Errors are API. Design them accordingly.
If your server crashes in the middle of the night and you're told about it in the morning after it's been restarted, will you be able to do anything about it? If your answer is no, then you've got a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's so rough when you have this issue, and then essentially you have to keep going back and modifying what gets logged to try and figure it out, because you can't duplicate it in development, and you don't have enough information in your logs to figure out how it happened in production. And sometimes there are going to be bugs that way, no matter how good at this you are. But for heaven's sake, you know, if you know that something unexpected might happen there, you know, you can set yourself up for success by just being aware and then having a good API and a good approach to logging errors.
Look, you might not have the sufficient logs the first time around, because, you know, obviously there's a limit on how much you can log and you don't want to be, you know, excessively verbose. And there are usually also costs associated with logging. But, you know, at the very least, you want to be able to change log level on some modules so that the next time it crashes, at least then you'll have sufficient context. If you now have to start adding new logs, it's going to be a pain.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, definitely. And this in the post there's a section provide meaningful logs. Again, it goes back to being intentional, treating this as part of your API and part of your contract. It's possible to go way overboard, logging completely useless information that completely drowns out the useful bits of information. So it's as much of a decision of what not to log as it is what to log and where and when. And you know, there's a whole science to it, but it takes time to get right. But you have to put a lot of thought into this part, and most people don't.
And you need to think about what logs at what level, and can you control levels like globally or per module and stuff like that, or at least per service and stuff like that.
And provide enough details that you can filter out the noise that's not relevant to a particular investigation.
I was going to say there are libraries that give you kind of a default format to start from that are typically better than the default logging deal that you get from what you're beginning with. And so, you know, have a look at those, figure out what they're doing, and then just be intentional from there. I may also need to know this.
Yeah, if you're a developer, you also need to make sure your logs are not too verbose, that go back to the developer with the right feedback and not a lot of noise that is useless to troubleshoot. Anything
else on that one?
I will say, talking about the cost of logging, it's a fairly old article at this point, but when Matteo and Dave Mark Clemens and stuff were getting started on Pinot, they did some research on the cost of logging, the performance cost of logging. That, you know, even though the exact numbers and stuff may be different today than what they were back then, it is still an excellent read. Matteo, if you can provide maybe the link to that, I don't have it handy, but
of course I can. It's very old. It's very old.
Real, but I consider it kind of part of the must-read collection of stuff for understanding a lot of this stuff, because it really breaks down why there's a cost to logging, why you have to be intentional about this stuff.
Here you go.
So And one more thing, I see in the article, Matteo, that you recommend Pinot as a library to use for logging.
Yeah, well, that's what Dave and myself wrote all those years back when we saw that logging was the major bottleneck of most modern applications.
Oh, wow.
Which is incredible. Like, it's so the first one was logging, okay, and the second one was Express. So I created Pinot, and then I created Fastify.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was my journey, and optimizing the ecosystem. So I started creating one, then I moved from there, moved to the next one. Okay, done. Essentially, and no, it's very problematic. Okay, there is a lot of logging is very hard. It's a very hard topic. Okay, like either it's a big problem, it's a big pain, or it's absolutely not. Okay, if you are at certain scale, it's a massive pain.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like the three latest companies that I've worked, including the latest one, Sisense, where I currently work. You've got the DevOps person coming up to you and saying, "Why have we got 1 billion logs every day? Do you really need all those logs?"
Yeah,
pretty much. But it's actually very hard. It's a very hard problem to fix. Okay. And to be able to achieve the right level of granularity and everything. So with Pinot, we have reached a very good, I think, good balance. It works very well out of the box with good defaults, okay? But it can also be tuned down for your app to the exact what you need, okay? And, it has very, very, fine-grained configuration that you can put it in. And it's very important that you do those things once you reach a certain level of production.
For me though, using the tool is one thing, and I would recommend Pinot absolutely, hands down. But for me, it mostly comes down to being aware of what you're logging and what the costs are. If what you're logging are a bunch of large objects that are getting JSON serialized, understand that there's a cost to JSON serialization, right? And if you're sending these massive objects into this thing,
no, it's free, James. Come on, marshalling is not free.
But it's like, we end up with these with this code. I mean, I've seen this time and time again, where you have these this logging logic, and they're like, hey, we're following the best practice. We're logging on these levels. Well, okay, that level is not activated. Why are you still constructing this massive object, unconditionally passing it off to there, when that has its own cost? And, folks need to stop and think about what they're logging and why and how, not just what tool they're using, and understand that this stuff has a definitive cost.
I'm sometimes so anal on those things, but I guess it's my mentality going back to the good old days of C and C++ and stuff like that. It really bugs me when I see something being computed for absolutely no reason.
My brain seg-faulted when you said the good old days with C and C++.
Hey, I still
were
live.
Good.
Guys, I have to drop off because there are sirens here. So
Be safe.
Stay safe.
thank you. Bye.
All right, let's talk API specifications here real quick. So, yeah, who wants to tackle this one?
Yeah, I'm pretty opinionated on this, and mostly because of what James just said. A contract is essential. You need to have it. You need to understand how you're going to collaborate with other people. Mostly now that everyone is on decoupled services, or a lot of the applications hopefully are moving into that kind of architecture. To make sure that you have the right governance, you need to have API contracts first. So that's 100% a must.
Yeah. So you guys in this one, you recommend either OpenAPI or GraphQL. You said that it depends on what you want, right? They have different strengths. So yeah. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about that, and then I'm really curious about generating clients and types because, and anyway, go ahead and answer that first part, and then we can get into the clients and types. I got some questions there.
Let me take that very, very briefly. Then I'll probably pass the ball to Natalia because she has a different opinion from me. So it's
nerd fight.
Yeah. So the Open API is great. It provides a map to REST. Okay. So if you know how your systems are going to be composed and used, okay, this is great. However, they still suffer from, the level of granularity that you're doing with REST. Okay. So it means that in order to achieve a certain function, a certain behavior, they will need to developer using those APIs will need to issue 2, 3, 4, 5 different calls. Okay, especially and these can add a lot of latency. That's the problem. To fetch the data that they need, to get the data that they need. With GraphQL, you can actually do that with one single pass and have that logic done on the server side. Okay. Which I don't want to go into the intricacy of implementing that correctly, but the different in use case is if you don't know how your system is going to be read and accessed, GraphQL is a great system, great way to provide discoverability and easy way to consume the data. Okay, while my generic understanding is that using OpenAPI can lead to more performant implementations and that are easier to scale generically. So at the cost of latency. So you see, there is a trade-off. And Natalia, yeah. I know that you differ. You have a different opinion, so I'm leaving it to you.
No, I mostly agree with what you say. Like with everything else, you need to evaluate your trade-offs. What do you want to have? Caching, do you want to have a more granular or underfetching? Yes, then go with a certain pattern or another. I am 100% sure that even if you're doing GraphQL, you need to have a contract, no matter what. And generating your clients it's right now a possibility. Generating your client on top of the contract is very effective.
So that kind of leads right into this next part, which is generating clients and types. So I have to admit, I've mostly done REST. Where I've done GraphQL, like I had to build the resolvers and stuff like that. It just felt like a lot of extra work to get that GraphQL to work. I mean, if I was doing front end that consumed GraphQL, a lot of times it was just magic, right? And so I felt like the trade-off may or may not have been worth it. Am I looking at this wrong, or is there something I just haven't seen there?
GraphQL, okay, removes a lot of the with GraphQL, which is something, it's a fantastic system if you have a lot of disjointed teams that do not talk with, and you want to minimize the communication between them. Okay. Essentially, it's a tool that enables, it is your GraphQL endpoint. It's my problem to maintain that the team that produces it, maintaining and keeping it up and keeping it performant, which it might be very much in trouble in doing so, but it's a business choice, okay? And then consumers can get that, okay? The consumers can just, they feel the magic, okay? Somebody feels the pain, somebody else feels the magic, okay? With REST and OpenAPI, you probably, it's less magical. That's what I'm saying. You can generate
hyper. Yeah. Get a little bit of tighter coupling with the.
It leads to tighter. It generically leads to tighter coupling.
Which is ironic, given REST was originally intended to avoid the tighter coupling, but you still end up with that.
Yeah, well.
So, but I think to Natalia's point, the most important thing is having a contract. And if you can generate code from that contract automatically, cool, all the better. But you have to start with the contract, whatever that is. I mean, you can write the API contract just in a markdown document and say this is how the damn thing works. But you have to start with the contract first.
Yep. Is there anything you wanted to add on those points, or?
I think Natalia and Matteo covered it perfectly. There are trade-offs. If you can generate, cool. It's going to be better for everyone. Whichever one you use depends on what your specific requirements are.
Gotcha. Now, there was a section here about API first versus code first.
So that is a different in pattern. So there's a lot of debate between all the people that do contract-based development that they should start with this big design session where the contract of the API is defined, okay? And then the people writing, consuming it go their merry way, and then the people writing the API go their merry way. Oh, and that's it. Okay, bye, Natalia. I don't know. She's gone.
And she said she had a hard stop.
Yeah. And basically one went one way, the other one went the other way. Okay. And then when they try to meet in the end, it never works.
Okay. It sometimes works. Yeah, sometimes works.
I don't know.
I'm very much a code first person, and I'll work back to the API, but then I won't finish the code until the API contract is figured out. So it can work.
My generic my experience is the contract is ready when the implementation that implement that contract is ready, is final. Okay, you cannot finalize that, and therefore I am more or less saying that that, and then but the key challenge there is you need to keep to uphold the contract. Okay, once you establish the contract, you need to not break the contract. Okay? Right. Very important, because if you start breaking that, this is one of the major causes of downtime. Somebody changed an API and said, "Oh, but this thing is now required." It's not, or these things was optional before, and now these things was required before is now optional. Whatever. Okay, and then the crashes starts happening all over the system, and one little change in a tiny microservice can bring down the full fleet. Mm-hmm.
Either that, or you end up with tons of technical debt and outdated code and obsolete stuff that you have to keep around forever. So, yeah.
All right. Well, just to wrap up, is there kind of an overarching theme or any messages that you want to kind of add to this, or do we just?
For me, the overarching theme is be intentional, be aware, like pay close attention to thing you're doing, whether it's breaking down the tasks so you're not looking the event loop, to whether it's bringing in a new dependency, to how you're designing your API. You have to stop and think about what you're doing.
Yeah, and pretty much all the ones in this list, that's the think about what you're doing, and this is almost a nice checklist to go through to say, have we been intentional enough? Did we plan what we're doing in each of these places, and go from there?
Yeah.
All right. Good deal. I'm not sure if Matteo is frozen or.
Matteo
he's just
he's
holding
being
very still.
recalled by the family, and I really need to drop now.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I need to say bye.
Ciao. Great conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to throw in some picks. I don't know if you want to do that too, Michael. But yeah, let me jump in here real quick with my picks, and then you can go ahead and throw in yours. Or if James is going to stick around, he can do that too. But
I got like 3 minutes. So
okay, well maybe you can go first.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you did picks last time.
Yeah, did them last time. I'm just going to say something super simple. Step away from the computer, go outside, talk to people. Don't get too wrapped up in stuff. Especially folks in the U.S., things are kind of still, rather, there's quite a bit of turmoil and stuff. So just step away, take a break. That's it.
Yep. So it's good advice any time of the year.
Oh yeah. I'm going to go ahead and drop off. Great chatting with you guys.
Okay. Thanks for coming, James.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to throw in my picks here. So my first pick, I always do a board game pick. This last weekend, I was at a board game convention, and I was teaching people the hot games. So my friend picked the games, and we taught them at for free at the tables at the game, or at the game convention. So I'm just going to pick one of those games. The game that I'm picking, and this was a super fun game. It was relatively simple to pick up. I can explain it to people in like 10 minutes, and it takes about 45 minutes to play. You can play two to four players. It's called Gnome Hollow. And effectively, I'm not going to give you the 10-minute spiel. I'm going to give you the 2-minute spiel, and then if you want to go learn it, you can. Board Game Geek weights it at 2.17, so it's a fairly easy, casual gamer game. The way you play it is you are making like circles of like mushroom circles, right? So there's the kind of mythological. You find a circle of mushrooms, and it's fairy something. So I don't know. But anyway, so you're making mushroom rings, and then you harvest the mushrooms from the rings. You take them to the market. You sell them for points. As you create more rings, you also discover different kinds of wildflowers, and so you can collect the wildflowers, and those are worth points. And then as you complete rings, you also move markers down onto your board that gives you rewards. And the number of markers you've moved down is also a way of scoring points. Those are the three things that score at the end of the game: the points you've bought, or the points you've sold your mushrooms for, the amount of different wildflowers you've brought into your board, and then the number of rings you've completed, basically. It was super fun. Once you play a round or two, it's like, oh, okay, I totally get how this goes. And so the rest of it is just figuring out which strategies you want to go for, right? Am I going to maximize on flowers, on rings, or on, harvesting and selling mushrooms? And yeah, it was really, really fun. Of all the games that we taught, this one was probably my favorite. I did buy one of the other games before the board game convention because I liked it so much. But I picked it on the show before. It's Challengers. So anyway, I'm going to pick that one, Gnome Hollow. And like I said, it's a 45-minute to an hour game. And yeah, the artwork on it is amazing. That always makes it more fun if it's got a good theme and it all kind of is cohesive. A couple of other things I'm going to pick. I've been watching the show Reacher, and I've been enjoying that. I just like the way that Jack Reacher essentially is. I'm going to do the right thing that I think is the right thing, and you can all just go pound sand. And, if you get in my way, I'm going to make you wish you hadn't. I don't know. I like the take no prisoners. I'm going to find the truth approach to life. So, this kind of takes it to an extreme. It's kind of a violent show. So if that's not your cup of tea, don't watch it. You're right. It gets a little bit, just violent. So I'm going to pick that. And then the last pick along the lines of what James was picking, we just had the elections here in the United States. I know a lot of people have feelings about it. I've taught, I live in Utah. We're a red state. A lot of people are pretty happy that, Trump won and that, the House and the Senate. But then I see people kind of taking to task or making fun of people who are sad because, their side didn't win. And I'm not about that. I think some of the ways that people are reacting or overreacting to it is amusing, but I just keep that to myself because at the end of the day, it's not worth it to demonize or, make somebody feel bad because their side didn't win. So I just encourage everybody to be kind to each other. And then the folks on the other side, because I do see the posts where it's like, my family all voted for Trump and I'm never going to talk to them again. It's like, guys, don't do that, right? Either side, don't do that. Everybody has reasons why they voted the way they voted. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. You think that they see what you see and then they voted the other way anyway. That's generally not true. I think we all mostly want to be, prosperous and happy and be able to take care of our families and things like that. So, just give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And, you know, if you're not up for having the conversation with the people you care about, then don't. But if you can, and you can come to understand a little bit more of, I was really scared that this was going to happen if Trump or Harris got elected, you know, or I really care about this issue, and so I voted, you know, maybe a single issue or mostly a single issue. At least then you can kind of see where people are coming from. And a lot of times you see the humanity in them anyway. So I'm just going to encourage that. I'm not really shy about where I come down on this stuff, so you can all probably guess it, but that's not what this show is about. And I really feel like the best thing we can do at this point is just kind of come together, make sure we understand each other, and then take care of each other. So anyway, Michael, what are your picks?
I'm just going to have one really quick one. Over the years, I've always wished I could like print, heads for the little Lego man, to play around with. And
that sounds awesome.
Yeah. Maker World, which is from Bamboo Labs. They actually have recently, they've got like I think it's probably AI based or something, but they've got like a new offering where if you log in, you can upload a picture and it basically will create you a 3D printable, head of that you can then adjust and tinker with just like any other 3D print. So pretty cool.
I want to do that for all my kids now.
There you go. Well, now go to Maker World and they make it easy. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, we're a Lego family here for sure. So awesome. Well, Michael, I was going to ask this of everybody else, but they're all gone. If people want to connect with you, where do they find you?
You can follow me on Twitter, MHDawson1, also on Blue Sky at MHDawson without the one, because I managed to get that one first. And or in GitHub, very active in the Node project GitHub. So that's the best places.
Awesome. I just barely joined Blue Sky. I'm CMaxW, just like I am on Twitter. I will say that I am looking to set up accounts for the shows. So keep an eye out for JavaScript Jabber. It'll probably be JS Jabber unless that's taken. So anyway, I know people are, again, kind of the political whatever for, I want to be off Twitter and on Blue Sky. As long as I can reach you and you're happy to get our stuff, I'm happy to stay either place. So, or be whatever place, right? So as long as we can connect, I guess is what I care about. But yeah, definitely stay in touch there. And until next time, folks, Max out.